DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. We're joined by Matt Murschel, college football writer for the Orlando Sentinel, who we feel really bad for. So, Matt, we're going to start with sympathy first. You have our full sympathy.
Okay.
You didn't expect that, did you? Well, I say that because I'm a TV guy doing radio. PK is a newspaper guy who's now doing radio, but he is a beat writer for a long time. And so I really got, talking to him, I really got used to the rhythm of being a beat writer. It is a grind. In season, it is nonstop. It is not an 8-hour-a-day job. It is not a 5-day-a-week job. If you want that job, you better go do something else because you're working 6 or 7 days a week and you're working 10, 12, or 14 hours. And even when you think you're off, something happens and you're on again and you got to leave at the birthday party. And that's just the way it is, right? And then recruiting, and now the transfer portal. But there's downtime. There's good time. There's comp time. And that's June and July. And you're chasing this Florida State bizarro realignment story we're going to get into, and it's wrecking your June and July. So you have my sympathy.
Yeah, it is funny. I was telling someone the other day that I remember, a decade ago that you would have at least a couple months where you could kind of take a deep breath and not maybe, work full, 6 days a week. You could maybe work 3 or 4 days and maybe even take a vacation. And now that's all gone out the window, it seems like, over the last 24 months because there's so much stuff going on in college athletics. And Florida State move obviously is the latest that we've been talking about.
From a distance, it seems like the relationship with the ACC is so bad that that's driving that. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think Florida State has obviously made it very clear they feel like that the ACC, hasn't been doing its due diligence to try to make sure that they're making enough money to be, got the same competitive level as the Big Ten and the SEC. And, they've talked about this for almost a year now, the Board of Trustees meetings and Michael Alford, the athletic director, saying, listen, we're going to wind up being $30 million to $40 million a year behind these other schools, and we can't let that happen. And so they've made it very clear they're not fans of the ACC. Now they're trying to do what they can in the meantime, but with this lawsuit going on, it's obviously created a lot of tension in this conference. So I think next week is going to be a very interesting time when the ACC hosts its football media days to have these schools there, Florida State and Clemson, and have them trying to act like there's some sort of unity going on because there really isn't. Florida State wants to get out. Clemson wants to get out. And if that happens, who knows who else may follow them through the door. It could be North Carolina. It could be Virginia. They're just not sure yet at this point. So there's definitely no love there. And it's going to be interesting to see if this lawsuit doesn't happen the way people think it's going to happen. Is there any way to salvage this kind of marriage together, or is it beyond salvage and everyone's got to go their own separate ways?
I don't know there's anything the ACC can do. Just like the Big 12 and the Pac-12, they've all taken different roads. They've built their own network in the case of the Pac-12. They haven't done any network, and they've let Texas have their own network in the case of the Big 12. And in the ACC, they partnered with ESPN, and they signed a long-term deal. It's 3 different paths, but the fact is none of them generate enough money, and it's because of where the schools are, small population centers, in the shadow of NFL teams. And the Big Ten and the SEC, they got the most people and the most tradition and the most money, and they are just pulling away. Do you really think there's anything the ACC can do?
No, I don't. I mean, and listen, I think the ACC, what started this whole thing off was, you guys remember, is that the ACC wanted to create its own network. It wanted to have a network similar to what the SEC had done. And at the time, John Swofford, who was the commissioner of the ACC, they sat down with the school presidents and they said, we're going to make this deal. We're going to create our own network. And ESPN said, sure, we'll do that for you, but you're going to sign this contract that was a 12-year deal. And, the ACC said, sure, no problem, we'll do this. It's going to create so much more money. It's going to help us out. And it did create more revenue for them, but not nearly as much as what we saw from the SEC and the Big Ten. And I don't think anyone realized that. So, there is a little bit of this idea that, okay, yes, you guys did sign your name to this contract. You guys realize what's going on. But at this point, I don't think there's any other way for the ACC to be able to generate more revenue. You could do, sponsorship deals and all this other stuff, but it's not going to be enough to catch you up with those other 2 conferences. So, unless you're going to sit down and start looking at the private equity line, which is what the Big 12 is kind of venturing in, I'm not sure if that's going to be able to happen. So there is no way ACC is going to nearly have enough money to catch up with them. And that's why Florida State and Clemson have both said, we've got to find our own way and go somewhere we're going to be able to find that kind of revenue.
Do they view the Big 12 as something that is enticing or just like a fallback option?
I think at this point it's a fallback option. I think they would love to go to the SEC and Big Ten. Now, mind you, none of this is being said out loud. I mean, they've just made it kind of clear in some ways that yes, we'd love to do the SEC, we'd love to do the Big Ten, we'd love to find a home that's going to provide that. I'm not sure. I've been saying this for a while now that I don't necessarily know if the SEC and the Big Ten were standing off at the sidelines with invitations ready to hand them to the FSU if they got out of the ACC deal. I don't think that was the case. I think they wanted to see what's going on here, and this is no slam dunk that that Florida State and Clemson are going to get out. It's going to take them a while with these lawsuits. So I think right now, as you heard from Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, that listen, we like 16. 16 is where we're at. It's where we see our future. Maybe, down the road if something happens, we'll look at that, but it's not a given. So now all of a sudden now the Big 12 looks like an option for Florida State if they get out. But will the Big 12 have nearly as much money as the SEC and Big 10? You don't know yet. Again, they're exploring the private equity options maybe to add some more revenue and put that in there as well. But is it enough to really kind of do a significant slice into the gap between the SEC and the Big 10? No one knows for sure. So again, it's a risk. I think that's the risk that the Florida State took when they decided to sue the ACC, and they're just hoping that it pays off in the end.
In the end, do you believe deep down the Big Ten wants FSU? And I get in the short run, it might look like they're tampering. They might be opening themselves up to lawsuits. So it might take a little time to play out. But a decade from now, Florida State, are they in the Big Ten?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of things the Big Ten, again, there's academics that the Big Ten is really is has been pushing for its schools. I'm not sure if they want to deep dive into the South. I know they've gone over to the West Coast, obviously, adding, UCLA and USC and Oregon and Washington, but I'm not sure if they want to stretch themselves that thin. I mean, you really are opening your conference to becoming, such a large footprint that it's going to make your teams have to really do a lot of traveling. I'm not sure if they want to do that, but again, when it comes down to it, if they sit down and think this makes financial sense for them, they feel like they can get more options. Let's not forget the Big Ten and the SEC's media rights deal are going to come up in 2030. I think it's 2031. They're going to have another option. So at that point, if Florida State and Clemson are out there, maybe that makes sense to them. Maybe they can add that, and maybe that helps them out. I'm just not sure. I mean, at some point, and I've asked a lot of people about this, is there a tipping point? I mean, we've talked about super conferences. We talked about, is this going to happen? But as an individual conference, is there a tipping point of getting to 19, 20, 21 schools? Does it make it so difficult to do all your other sports when it comes to scheduling that it becomes almost impossible? But, money always talks. And I tell people that, if there's enough money there and they feel like there's enough opportunity, they'll take advantage of whatever's there. Which
is why you can see Brent Yormark. I think he can't do it publicly. I think privately, though, he'd be salivating over Clemson and Florida State because it would be a really shot in the arm in their expansion and getting football up to a higher level. So from his perspective, it seems to me if he could get both of those schools, he would jump on it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, I think just how aggressive that Brett has been. He's not your typical conference commissioner. He's not a collegiate, administrator. He's a guy that runs the conference like a business. Just listen to him talk. His speeches at the media day were like a TED talk. He's talking about how are we going to generate more revenue? How are we going to make ourselves more viable? How are we going to survive? And, that's how you do that. You add some schools. You say, okay, we've added some Pac-12 schools. Now we add, let's say, Florida State and Clemson and, maybe, who knows, 2 other schools. Who knows at that point? And we increased ourselves. We made ourselves viable. And, you generate more revenue. You go back to ESPN and you say, okay, here or Fox or whoever, we can do more for that. And it helps their brand. So I would very much see Brett probably on right now thinking about that option and maybe even, not publicly doing this, but maybe even, talking to people about is there a possibility that happens?
Florida State had a phenomenal run for decades under Bobby Bowden. It really slipped. It looked like the brand was getting damaged, and they just seemed like just another school. And now the last few years, they've pulled it together again, and it was unfortunate with the quarterback injury last year in the playoff and the way that shook out. Do you think they're set up to be really good so that they have a big impact on whoever it is they're associated with going away, whether that's remaining the standard bearer in the ACC, becoming it in the Big 12, or being valuable to the two richest conferences?
Yeah, I do. I think Mike Norvell's done an amazing job coming in. And you're right. I mean, this program, under Bobby Bowden was successful, had a long run. Jimbo Fisher comes in, they win a national title. And then, it just kind of all fell apart once Jimbo left. They never could find success after that. And then Mike Norvell comes in. It's taken them a few years, but they've been able to rebuild the roster. They've been able to recruit better. They've found some success. They feel like they're on the right path. He's done a good job of mixing in transfers as well, and I think that's helped them. If they can have another couple years where they're either winning ACC championships or competing in the college football playoff, I think that would be huge for them in the big picture. But they've also got to do another sports. I mean, it's not just football. I mean, football drives the engine, but they've got to do another sports. Basketball's been really lacking. Men's basketball's been really lacking over the last 4 or 5 years. Baseball's done pretty well. Obviously, they've gotten the College World Series. Softball's done really well. They've got to continue to keep all their sports up there. And have them win in the next level, because that makes everything, the whole package, attractive. And as much as football is the thing, you want to be able to say, okay, if you're the Big Ten, for instance, yes, we got football, but we want to also throw some basketball in there as well that moves the needle. And I think they can do that. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
I think you got a little bit of knowledge of UCF, BYU, and Utah. Both are traveling down there this year. Malzahn building that program. Just speak to what awaits visiting teams coming in, and is that a tough place to play?
Yeah, it has been a tough place to play, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. They've done a great job of selling out their season tickets. They've had a lot of sellouts for their games. I think this game is close to being a sellout, or is a sellout. The stadium's over 45,000 fans. Once it gets going, it can be really rocking. There's a reason they call it the bounce house, and it's because if you're in the stands, you'll feel them jumping down, up and down, and it can shake the whole place. If you're in the press box, you can feel it shake, and it kind of throws some visiting media members off track a little bit when you're sitting in the press box feeling that place sway a little bit. But there is a lot of excitement. Obviously Utah has a wonderful history with what they've been able to do in the Pac-12. To have that game on a Black Friday in Orlando, I think that's amazing. I think, especially considering Utah is picked to win the all, and they could be in that mix. And if UCF can have a good season, maybe they're somehow in that mix as well. And I think that'll be an amazing game. And again, you mentioned with Gus and what he's been able to do with this program over the last couple of years, they hope to have a bounce back season after last year. I think it took them a little bit to realize the jump from the American to a Power 5 conference in the Big 12, and I think they were able to do a lot of things in the offseason through the portal and through recruiting that they feel like will help them out.
They've kind of been labeled a dark horse here. You're in the middle of the league, and they jump to the top of the league. Do you think that's too big an ask getting to the conference title game, or do you have them pegged as the 5-4, 6-3 team that can take anybody down any given week, but ultimately they're not going to find a way to get to a conference title game?
No, I think they could get there. I think UCF could get there based on what they've been able to do. I mean, if everything goes right and they stay healthy, I mean, I think they're going to be in the mix. That's the one thing about the Big 12. You could talk about the SEC and the Texases and the Georgias and even the Big 10 with Ohio State and Michigan. But when you look at the Big 12, I think the Big 12 has a lot of parity. I mean, there are 5 or 6 teams right now that, as much as Utah is picked to be the favorite, I think there are 5 or 6 teams that can be in that mix depending on what happens this season. So I think UCF can be part of that mix. Again, they've got to play better on the road. They've really struggled on the road the last couple of years. They've got to stay healthy, and I think they've done a better job in strength and conditioning. So I think that's going to be a huge part of what they're doing. So, but again, if they can find a way to win on the road and win some of those games, I think they can be a factor. And they definitely have a schedule that's a lot easier than it was last year because they traveled 17,000 miles. They had a lot of road games, and it really became a challenge for them and something that they really struggled with. And it cost them at the end of a lot of games. They were not able to finish a lot of their games.
How hot is the seat for Billy Napier in Florida?
I think it's really hot. I mean, I think this year is going to be a make or break year for him because he starts out playing. They start up against Miami, which is an in-state game. Obviously, that's a huge one. And then down the road they're going to end up facing UCF at home. So that's going to be a challenge for them. If he loses those two games, and then let's say they lose a game to Tennessee, which is in the mix around there as well. If he's got 3 or 4 losses before the midseason, I'm not sure if he survives the whole year. I mean, I just think the fan base is not happy with the way things have gone. They've got one of the toughest schedules in college football, and he's recruited okay, but not great. And so at some point, fans are saying, we need something better. We're watching our rival Georgia, win and win constantly, and we're watching Tennessee get better, and we're watching now Texas is in the league and Oklahoma. They're a rabid fan base. They want to see those results. And Billy just hasn't been able to deliver that yet. Now, to his credit, he's trying the best he can with a schedule that's been so difficult, but they just haven't found the pieces to kind of to work out well. So I think if he struggles early on or Florida struggles early on, I'm not sure if he survives the year.
Well, if he doesn't, he'll have our sympathy, the sympathy we haven't already reserved for you, Matt.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Matt Murschel there, college football writer for the Orlando Sentinel, covering UCF, covering college football throughout the state for the Orlando Sentinel.